All right, the live stream connection has been reestablished. Sorry, Councillor Scully, if you would continue.
Not quite sure where the live stream cut off.
Just start all over again.
Oh, perfect. Exactly what I would want to do. I was just thanking staff for their the thoroughness to which they have reviewed this file, and it's evident that they've shown a tremendous amount of respect to this file, and given the contentiousness of the development. And we see that through the long list of conditions and provisions. And we did hear from some residents who came out today, and they did express some concerns about living through the construction process. And as a representative and a resident of Ward 1, I can certainly empathize with the frustrations that come along with that process. So I do hope that the consultant here today will take that message back to Elite and make sure that we're moving through this process as respectfully as possible for the surrounding community. I do think there are a few items within what I've seen of the neighborhood that we could use some polishing, but I think it's things that we'll work through. They're fairly minor. So I will be supporting this moving forward today. And I thank you very much for a well done presentation. It was very easy to follow along with, and for helping us understand the details of it. So thank you very much to Weston, and saying that I will be supporting this today. Thank you.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
A bumpy ride and a long journey for sure. Opposition to this development was incredibly strong. And, you know, I get calls from some people that were on board with it. They were on board with it because they were told a number of things all prior to 2021 when the formal plans were submitted. You can get that information that came from past councillors, other councillors, and quite frankly from Elite. And so those people that maybe weren't as opposed at the beginning because they thought that they were going to get something different. That difference that they thought they were getting comes right off the Elite development site, where it says, you know, we look forward to developing 32 acres with 300 plus singles and towns alongside 17 acres of the city park. We envision building affordable luxury homes featuring contemporary craftsman exteriors complementing the surrounding countryside. Puts a nice vision in your place, the countryside. And if you looked at Airedale, you'd be thinking, yeah, countryside, because the people that have been living there have been seeing a countryside for their eternity, and that countryside is now going to disappear. And so the calls came to me afterwards, particularly after the summer of last year, when the formal presentation was presented to the public, from those people that they didn't hear it from me. They heard it from others about how they were getting a higher end homes, 300 homes, and was going to enhance their neighborhood. And they certainly were opposed to things like townhouses, more affordable housing in the area at the time, and apartment buildings. I mean, that was really clear from those that were in favor. So, you know, there's going to be a whole group of people that are let down by things that they heard in the previous 2 years prior to the formal submission and the one that came the last little bit. When people did ask me about that, I said, hey, you know what? I've been around now. I've seen that's not how it works. Look at our neighborhood. We've had this little gem in the middle, but when the developers come, they're going to use up every inch of land. They're going to look around. They're going to see apartment buildings because they exist. They're going to see townhouses because they exist. And that's what you're going to see more of. And you're going to see density on it. Did I know what the numbers were going to be? No, but I told them what they were actually going to see. And that's what's come here. So one may applaud the work done to get a whole bunch of sardines put into an area. We've doubled that figure, and there's going to be a lot of homes in there. When you think of what we could have done, and I, you know, you hear some of the commentaries, and I think it was even mentioned around council at the time, the ability to create a carbon neutral property on one of the greenest spaces we had in the middle of the city. That's not going to happen. But that's something we could have happened. When you see how little of the remaining green space there is in this development area from what there was, you know, we are really looking at density targets, and that's the new normal for this area. I felt I was strung along like many of the people, because this is the outcome where we're at today, and I don't. I think that the consultant, masterful. Not his problem. They bought property, they need to make money, and they're going for density, and this is how you do it. And it does meet all of our targets. We are going to miss some targets, though, because you start to hear the cracks. Who's going to pay for
Mark, you've gone beyond 4 minutes. Do you want a second speaking opportunity?
Certainly.
I've marked you down. Councillor Carpenter?
Yes, thank
Your
you.
opportunity to a second.
Thank you. Just to where I left off, to my council colleagues regarding parkland in lieu of, there was a time when we really didn't have a policy, but it was a practice that where the developer paid for parkland in lieu of because they couldn't provide a park in a particular area, it stayed in the area. But that's not the case anymore. And I'd like the CAO, if he's listening, to bring forward such a recommendation so we can make sure that when someone pays for parkland in lieu of, the neighborhood benefits from it. Let me give you a real clear example of it. The Gray Street extension was redeveloped with a lot of townhouses, a lot of condominiums. And yet Echo Park is not only not finished, there isn't funds to finish it. There isn't even funds to get an access roadway, access pathway from Gray Street to the park. The residents and the children have to tramp through the field to get to that park. Had that money in Parkland Lewin stayed in the neighborhood, that park would be fully developed and the neighborhood would be benefiting from a much upscale park that should have come from the funding. It went somewhere else into the budget. I have a problem when money goes into the general revenue fund and then the neighborhood never benefits from it. So that's my concern with parkland in lieu of. The other issue is, now I'll go back to what my list. So I want councilors to at least think about that coming forward. We need to change that policy so that, and I think a developer could actually challenge it. We're getting parkland funding in lieu of parkland, and then it doesn't go in that area. Why would we even be charging it to that developer if in fact we're not using it for what the intent seems to be for? Item 36 in the condition, this is the one that undertakes a monitoring program for the stormwater management bond. This was addressed earlier in conversation with members of council. So the developer will take charge of this pond 2 years after post-development. So completely after development, after all the development's finished, not just part of it. Is that what I'm understanding there?
Through the chair, that is correct.
So it'd be 2 years after the whole development's completed. So block the number 9, for example.
Through the chair, that is correct. And it'd be for, again, monitoring that pond to ensure that it's meeting the targets that it was designed to.
Okay, and question 51 is all retaining walls be on private land. So if it's on a condo corporation, it would be registered in the condo corporation. It's something the condo corporation would have to maintain as part of its reserve fund study going forward. And if it's on private individual lots, it would be registered part of the deed.
Through the chair, it would be on the private property. It wouldn't necessarily be registered on the deed, but it would be on the private property.
How would the owner know that that was something that they had to maintain? And how would we be able to make sure they maintain it?
Those provisions can be included in the condo declaration. We've
Yep.
done that in other instances.
But the single family lots where we're probably going to have, we may have that. Can we make sure that's registered at least somehow, at least in the sale? I mean, you know, you often hear someone say, well, that train never comes by here.
Mhm.
And then next thing you know, it's
We
come by
would-
there 3 times a day.
We would capture that in clauses in the subdivision agreement.
Okay, and the one there's some spots in here where there's a storm sewers in backyards. Now Councillor Hunt and I have dealt with this problem in Brentwood Park. How will we have access to those storm sewers? It looks like the owner of the property has responsibility for maintaining those storm sewers.
Through the chair, so there's an existing sewers that run along the open space there, and they were to stay there. They're too expensive to relocate, so we'd be obtaining easements through the subdivision process that'd be registered on title for access. And also part of that parkette was to provide additional ability to get to that access point of where those sewers are located. Secondly, there is already an existing easement through a property on Henry Street that a city has easement rights to get to that back area.
Okay, so we'll have access to them and we'll maintain them even when it comes to West Nile Island.
So Councillor Carpenter, you can wrap it up in 10, 15 seconds.
No, I have a number of questions, so maybe somebody else will speak and then I'll come back.
Yep. Well, we have 2 speaking opportunities, 4 minutes each.
In planning? I thought that was only council and committee of the whole.
No, it's planning as well.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate.
So I'll go to you, Councillor Van Tilburg. I think you said you wanted to come second time.
Thank you, Mayor Davis, and through you. And so one of the changes that we've made, and we're hearing all these issues about things that are gonna cost us extra monies in terms of garbage, sidewalks and things like this. And yet the property taxes for this area are being used for the Affordable Housing Fund, which means that it will be other residents that'll be footing the bill for the amenities for this property. And so my question to staff may be, is there a way to put an extra levy on these properties in order to have them cover the services that will need to be implemented and covered through taxes? Because we heard in some of the presentations from those affected by this development in a negative way that they're the ones actually technically in a roundabout way putting the bill for those changes. So is there a way to put a levy on some of these issues on, or even move them onto the developer?
Through the chair to the counselor, that would be something that we would have to review with our finance and legal departments. I don't have an answer for that today.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move a motion to waive the rules to allow members of council more than 2 speaking opportunities.
Yep, that's quite permissible. Need a seconder and it'll require 2/3 vote. So do we have a seconder on that? Councillor Van Tilburg seconding it. So just to confirm, you're saying we have 1 additional speaking opportunity?
I think one will do it, yes.
Okay. So 1 additional speaking opportunity of 4 minutes, and that would be for this particular hearing only, I assume. You're not trying to change our rules of procedure. Just specific to this meeting.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. All right. So I'll put that to the vote.
The motion to waive the rules to permit 1 additional speaking opportunity carries on a recorded vote of 4-2. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sless, Carpenter, Van Tilburg. Those opposed, Councillor Sokoli, Councillor McCreary.
So I think Councillor Van Tilburg, I lost track of that. I think you were going next, your second speaking opportunity.
I used my second, and we're going to hear from Councillor Carpenter, and that will be that.
So Councillor Carpenter, go ahead.
Thank you. Also, one of the conditions is the rear lot fencing, and also it mentions very clearly that those individual lots will not have access to the parkland with gates. Would that be something else that we registered on title? We've had the problem in the past where they didn't know that they couldn't put a gate in and all of a sudden gates appeared.
Through the chair, that is correct. That would be a part of the subdivision agreement that is registered on title.
Okay, and the ward council still will be part of the review of the site plan?
Through the chair, yes, the ward councilors will be a part of the review of the subdivision process, then ultimately when the Planning Act applications come into site plan as well.
Okay, and just to speaking to it now, other than the Item 1 recommendations, we talk about the money for affordable housing, i.e. the sale of the property, and then the taxation of the land. I hope this doesn't mean that we don't see regular money from the capital budget being put into affordable housing, but it's now taken out of affordable housing and put somewhere else, and then this money, new money put in there instead. Otherwise, that's just a shell game. I want to make sure that we're still contributing annually in our operating budget to affordable housing, and we're not using this as our option, but really just moving money around. If we really mean that this is going to contribute to affordable housing file, it needs to contribute to it on a larger basis. Secondly, we all know this development has been very, very controversial, and you know, the limited ability for people to speak to it and the concerns raised about this whole development and the process that we all went through several times have been very controversial. The residents have been very respectful at the public meetings that we've held. The one that we had with the meeting with the developer, residents were very respectful, and it went very well. And the developer, Mark, did a great job of responding to most of their concerns. Not all of them I know, but most of them. The issue then with the development is a lot more than people had imagined. The Place to Grow legislation has put more intensification, more housing everywhere, and stacked townhouses has always been a concern. And these lot line condos, they're not going to be lot line condos. They're lot line buildings are sold individually. Are they not? They're not. Those stacked townhouses are not condos with lot line condos where you can't get to the backyard. Can I get some clarification on those ones?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we don't have details as to what those stacked townhouse units will look like. Some examples previously in the city would have a unit on the ground floor that would have access to the outdoors, and then one on the second floor that would have access, but typically be in the form of private amenity space, in the form of a balcony, as an example.
Okay. And on the lot lines, I have concerns with that style of condo. We have them on Gray Street, and I have residents that then have built their fences out past the access point, and we can't even access our own storm sewer, and I'm still trying to deal with that issue by fixing those. When you have lot line condos, every condo, it can be made the same. You know, you had a yellow door, a green door, one's maintained, one's not maintained. Their level of maintenance isn't the same, and then over time it deteriorates. So I have concerns with those kinds of lot line condos. I just have to say that going forward. And the development, that whether it's what the street names, we have a street name policy, by the way. We'll have to follow the street name policy if we're going to bypass that. We certainly have some consultation with the ward councillors, and before any such resolution would come before council on that. I think then maintenance. Linda talked about the maintenance, but ward mate talked about the maintenance. The maintenance in the past, Mark, has not been very good. In fact, when we had the public meeting that very night, Elite was on the site grading the site without permission to grade the site. And then recently I went by the site and they were taking down a large tree on the site that, again, permission wasn't granted to take that tree down. It's down and gone now. It no longer exists there. It was a large tree. So that issue, we would like to know for sure from staff that we're going to make sure that the property is maintained all through currently and up to finishment of development. And I know staff have already said they're going to do that, but I still have some concerns. Past practice leads to future practice. So I want to make sure that we're going to have some assurances that we'll be monitoring this site very closely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, and through you to staff. The fencing condition does not say what we are requiring them to build, and I think I'm going to play off Councillor Carpenter here in terms of how much control do we have over what that fence is. So you put up a wooden privacy fence, and a couple of years down the road, it doesn't look like it did when you built it. So do we have control over what we actually tell them they have to build along that whole westerly boundary of the property?
Through the chair, we do have control of the type of fencing. Typically, when we look at fencing between residential subdivisions and existing open areas, it's a black vinyl fence. However, being that we are also working on the park project next door, I'm sure we can work with that project to determine the appropriate fence type. And always in that situation, the fence is placed on city-owned land, so we have control over it.
Okay, and one other question, perhaps to Nicole. Phase 3 indicates that these are condo blocks. I am trying to get a sense based on the number of blocks, the number of condominium corporations that will be there, and the common area, which kind of looks like it's all going to be one common area, but that is subject to some interpretation. So I don't know if we have an answer to that yet, or if that's something that we need to address further down the road. But
Through the chair to the counselor, I believe at this stage has been communicated it'll likely be one condo corporation, but I think ultimately these applications, it is a bit premature to be dealing with the tender right now, so that may evolve over time with further discussion with the applicant.
Okay, thanks for that.
Staff, I've got some questions for you. One of the concerns I've had about this, in particular the higher density portions, is the impact that'll have upon the traffic in the Wayne Gretzky corridor. Did I understand, did I hear you correctly that before the development can proceed in phases 3 or 4, that the planned expansion or widening of the Wayne Gretzky between, I think it's Henry and Fairview, that will have to be underway?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay. All right. We heard from McGinnis House that they would like there to be pedestrian and bicycle access into I think both the Parkette and the larger Arrowdale Park. What can staff do to help facilitate that?
Through the chair, through the detailed design, we're going to definitely get both parties involved and sit down and look at some options. There are some significant constraints to making that happen, both grading, among other trees and other items that are potentially in the way. So it is something we're going to need some time to work with all parties to understand what potentially could be built. And then likely there would be something coming back to either council in a different condition about whether the city's obtaining that land through the subdivision or who's going to be owning that property if we can find a solution.
All right. I appreciate the work done by staff and the planner and experts for the applicant. And actually it's testament to the residents themselves. Much of what you've done is anticipation of the concerns that many of the residents will have in this area. And I think one of the concerns they've had is that there be a proper transition between whatever the existing development is in the neighborhood and what's on this property. And when I look at what's been proposed, I see that's done in many portions of the property, where on the outside you'll have lower density, single family residential. And it's as you move towards the center of the property that you move into something that's a little higher density, except for that, what is it, phase 5, lot 7, the 6-story apartment building. I'd like to know from staff, how is that good planning? Is that consistent with the neighborhood? It does seem to be quite a contrast between single family home and then a 6-story building, as opposed to putting the apartment building somewhere else on this property.
Through you, Mr. Chair, very good question. There's a few things that we take into consideration with the placement of these buildings, and I don't want to maybe elaborate in detail, but some of it does speak to the policy framework. I think it's also important to know there's actually a very similar contextual situation that exists in the neighborhood on Rowden Street. There's a 6-story building right next to single family homes. So there are what I would say maybe a precedent already that's been established, and it's not uncommon to see, apartment buildings next to single family homes. However, because of the lack of detail through site plan control, the appearance of that building, the massing of that building will be refined further. It's not necessarily going to be a straight, block sort of 6-story building.
Now, we also had that concern, I recall, the Hardy Road application that we dealt with about a year ago. And we had a concern about a 4-story apartment building, and we addressed it at council by amending that to townhouses. Then there was an appeal to the OLT, and then what you see in the OLT process is a proposal to do something that has even more density and more floors and higher. If that happened in this scenario, in this situation, what is the maximum that could be, that the applicant could propose for that lot going to the OLT?
So to the chair, ultimately, that would be for the applicant to decide. Obviously, it would be based on planning principles and rationale, but I think we're aware that oftentimes when matters do go to the OLT, we often see a very different proposal than the proposal that is often presented before council. So that could happen in this particular instance as well.
Thank you. So not seeing any further discussion, I'll call the vote.
Item 5.1 carries on a recorded vote of 4-2. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Counselor Secoli, Celeste McCreary. Those opposed, Counselor Carpenter, Counselor Van Tilburg.
Right, I'd like to thank everybody then that participated in respect to that matter. We have no notice of motion. We have no resolutions. So that going to adjourn the planning committee meeting for the month of February.